up where we left off.
Thank you so much. Dr. Angie, at this time, Ken, after we.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council, and good morning. We wanted to include, as we conclude our discussion for now of the strategic plan for affordable housing, we did want to take this opportunity to kind of provide an overview of the various organizations and groups that are involved in the issue of affordable housing here in Rocky Mount. And so we've prepared a brief presentation that Jason and I will be providing for you. I just wanted to go over this summary slide here real quick. As you see here, we have listed 13 different groups, 7 of which are boards and commissions that are officially part of the city operations, and then 6 independent organizations, nonprofits, or other organizations that are involved as stakeholders and partners in our efforts to address affordable housing. So we're going to go over each of these very briefly, talk a little bit about what they do. So now I will turn it over to Jason to go over the boards and commissions.
Thank you, Ken. All right, I'll be going over the boards and commissions. Our first board and commission is the planning board. The planning board reviews plans received a lot of times by development services for the development and betterment of Rocky Mount. They investigate the location, design of bridges, parks, public buildings, and streets, and then they report their findings to City Council for approval. It's a 9-member committee that serves for 3 years. 7 of the 9 are appointed by each ward. The remaining 2 seats belong to Edgecombe and Nash County. If appointed by Edgecombe and Nash County, in a lot of cases, you can only vote on issues involving Edgecombe and Nash County. The second board is the Board of Adjustment. The Board of Adjustment here and decides appeals. They review any order made in the enforcement of the city's land development code. It's also a 9-member board that serves for 3 years. 7 of the 9 are appointed by each ward. The remaining 2 seats belong to Edgecombe and Nash County. The difference between the Board of Adjustment and the Planning Board on a more membership sense is that the Board of Adjustment has 4 alternates, 2 appointed by the city, and the remaining 2 belong to Edgecombe and Nash County. The next board is the Community Appeals Board, which hears and decides all appeals on any decision made by a housing code inspector. It could be related to animals, health, sanitation, housing, nuisances. Also a 7-member board that serves for 3 years. All 7 members are appointed by each ward. The next board is the Historic Preservation Commission. The Historic Preservation Commission has 4 major tasks: safeguarding Rocky Mount's heritage by preserving and regulating historic landmarks and districts, enhancing neighborhood environmental quality, improving the property values, and fostering economic development. There are 9 members that serve in staggered 4-year terms. The council can also appoint ex officio members who have a special interest in education, experience, or that kind of work in history, architecture, archaeology, or one of those related social science fields. The next board and commission is the Redevelopment Commission, also known as the RDC. It exists for the public purpose of acquiring and replanting the blighted areas within the city limits. And they can also prepare redevelopment plans and undertake non-residential development where there is blight. It's the longest serving committee. It has 9 members and appointed by the mayor and council. They serve about 5 years, 5-year terms. The next board and commission is the newest board and commission and the longest serving board and commission. It's the Workforce Housing Advisory Commission, excuse me. It's the largest and the newest board. They advise council on housing challenges, opportunities, and options that result in fair, safe, and affordable housing throughout the city, minimize the impact of displacement and gentrification, and improve housing conditions in the city's underserved areas, historically underserved areas. No more than 13 members can reside on this commission that served for 3 years. 7 of the 13 are appointed by each ward. The mayor has an appointment, so congratulations, mayor. The remaining seats are recommendations from the Housing Authority, 2 by the faith-based community, 1 by the business community, and another 1 by a housing developer. And the final board and commission is the Central City Revitalization Panel, excuse me. It's responsible for downtown, encouraging incentives on the financial side for the improvement and preservation of downtown Rocky Mount. There are at least 10 members that serve in staggered 3-year terms. 6 are at large. 1 is a Central City property owner. 1 is a Central City business owner. 1 is a member of the Historic Preservation Committee. 1 is a builder or developer of commercial property. And the final appointment is a member of the Downtown Renaissance, which is our very own Councilman Chris Miller. All boards and commissions meet once a month. The Community Appeals Board has a little bit different. They tend to meet when they have a multitude of housing code inspecting cases. I will now pass it to Ken, who will talk about our community partners and stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. The first one I would like to talk about is the Rocky Mount Housing Authority. Obviously, they are heavily involved with the affordable housing matters in our community, involved in managing residential rental properties, as well as developing real estate, fostering human and community development, and implementing government shelter programs. Currently, their portfolio stands of 656 rental units at various complexes across the city, as well as 2 single-family units. They also operate 40 Section 8 family housing units and provide and administer 305 Section 8 vouchers that are used at housing complexes throughout the city. Next organization we'd like to talk about is the Rocky Mount Edgecombe Community Development Corporation, also known as the CDC. This is a nonprofit organization that works to stimulate economic growth in and around Rocky Mount in the Edgecombe County portion of the city. It is involved heavily in housing development, neighborhood revitalization, business development, as well as blight removal. We have undergone several projects with the Rocky Mount Edgecombe CDC over the years, including work at Genesis Estates, Thornridge Apartments, Harambe Square Apartments, as well as the neighborhood revitalization that's occurred around Holly Street. They're also involved in several other programs that we administer year to year as well. Another CDC is the Southeastern North Carolina CDC. This is actually a nonprofit component of the Rocky Mount Housing Authority, which is involved in developing housing units as well as assisting residents through financial self-sufficiency and job training. We've helped them and partnered with them on several projects, which includes currently in progress the Vance Street Homes Project, MS Hayworth Court, and also some work with Holly Street. They have some involvement with the Holly Street project as well. Another organization that's based here in Rocky Mount is the North Carolina Association of Community Development Corporations. It is a trade association for CDCs across the state of North Carolina, but it is based here, operates here primarily in Rocky Mount. And it advocates for the need of community economic development as well as the constituents that are served by the programs administered by CDCs. Recently, it has developed a 3-pronged approach for its efforts to promote community development in the Twin Counties, which include community economic development, community organizing, as well as advocacy for residents served. Another program that has been very active in recent years has been the Twin Counties Community Academy. It was created by the North Carolina Association of Community Development Corporations during the Twin Counties Visioning and Strategic Planning process. So that, of course, occurred several years ago, and it's been active in recent years. It has recently partnered with Legal Aid of North Carolina to promote equal housing opportunities for all, and tries to achieve this through continuing community education, as well as organizing around the Fair Housing Act, 2 programs that it is involved with here locally. The last organization I'll talk about is Self-Help Credit Union. This is an organization that is based in Durham. It is a full-service credit union. It does have a branch in Rocky Mount in the old People's Bank building. In 2020, it was involved in acquiring 58 properties from the North Carolina Community Development Initiative in an effort to help support the initiative's refocus from housing development to core lending. And it is working to leverage resources to provide additional affordable and moderate price housing in our area. Its agenda with respect to Rocky Mount involves, first of all, deciding whether to examining its inventories and looking to demolish or stabilize those properties, and also to determine how to turn these remaining homes into high quality, moderately priced, affordable housing. So we wanted to give an opportunity for you to see some of the partners and some of the community leadership that is involved in the affordable housing issue. We thank you very much for your time.
Okay. So what a meaty discussion we had so far this morning on the issues. And as I listened, I sense there is excitement among you as council people to create a strategic plan. There were a lot of exciting questions, and Dr. Angie is going to share some of the actions that we heard coming out of it. But there's excitement about the plan, and there were several specific questions regarding additional information needed. There's a lot of energy. There were some discussions about the issue of taxation and how do you manage that, which the city manager addressed, and so that's one of the themes that came up. There was also the theme about increased home ownership as a way to address both the economic disparities that exist right now, as well as to address the fact that there's been a history of economic difference that needs to be addressed. So the idea of having effective home ownership seems to be one important theme. I also sense there was also the theme of the fact that we have to do something quickly because there is an impending housing crisis. So how to balance the immediate needs with the longer term needs is another theme. I also heard a theme that I think we'll need to dig into more, which is the idea about how did we get here and what does change mean? And so I just wanted to give you a couple of things to think about. When we think about change in our work, we think about changes that have to happen at the personal level, but also institutional and structural changes, as well as cultural changes that need to happen. So change happens at 4 levels: personal, interpersonal, institutional, and cultural. I heard in the last part of your discussion some tension around the issue of personal responsibility and the issue of structural historic tensions, as well as current policies that might get in the way. Every community is dealing with that because we have a legacy that these cities have been around for a long time. So undoing that legacy is going to take work at each of those 4 levels. And I like the discussion about acknowledging where the privilege is, acknowledging where there are disparities, and thinking about that in a both and way, going back to the guidelines from yesterday, that yes, we have personal responsibility, and the city's role is to provide ways for folks to get out of economic disparities. And I hear you all thinking about the plan in that way. So I just wanted to name that and to say that part of our work will be what do you do at each level? So those are some thoughts that I have as I listen to you at this point. And Angie's going to then say some actions that she heard that need to come out of the discussion. And this is a quick summary now, and we'll be certainly providing the longer one in follow.
Thank you. Thank you, Val. The primary recommendation that we heard came from the city manager and her team in their presentation. Specifically, it was her recommendation to have a housing bond, which would be, of course, determined by the council. Some of the I would say, task actions as a result of that we captured was to identify the actions and seek approval from council. She also emphasized, City Manager Rochelle, also emphasized the importance of this living document that would continue to be revised and improved as we go. Is that my phone? Excuse me.
It's okay. It's a nice ring.
Thank you. I apologize. I apparently didn't have my phone on silent. We also heard an action around ensuring that there's full inclusivity among the citizens and voters of Rocky Mount. And then the city manager called for the question, are you all interested in pursuing this? I think that, of course, is an action that will come from the follow-up discussion by this group. And then the city manager went into some details that sounded important and imperative around considering interns to begin some of the work that would be necessary to seek legal counsel was an action we captured, as well as the tax foreclosure piece with the parameters around foreclosures, again, seeking actually the word choice I heard was mixed use community, really around the inclusivity equity piece was a part of the action, as well as the programmatic thrust around fair housing to align to the federal programs, and particularly patience with each other as you work toward this common goal. So what we heard was inclusivity, equity, diversity, and justice, perhaps. We'll let Val pick up on that later on. From here, Mayor Pro Tem, I turn it back to you for our next speaker.
Thank you so much. At this time, we will have a presentation on our housing bond from Ms. Amy Staton, Finances, and she would do it virtually. Amy?
You can hear me?
Now we can.
Very good. Thank you for the opportunity to join me virtually. I've been following your discussion from yesterday and again this morning, and funding is an important component for your comprehensive affordable housing plan. So I'm going to address financing as just one tool for this plan. I'm sure you've got others that you've heard and you're going to hear later, so this is just one tool for you to consider. What I'm going to talk about is bond financing, which in addition to affordable housing, you could put other things in that bond as well, some of your other initiatives, such as parks and streets that we talked about in the past. We talked about general obligation bonds, but I just want to quickly talk about some of the other types, one of which we've used. What we would do when we have a better idea of the plan that you want for the use of the bonds, we'll do some due diligence and evaluate each of these types and determine which one fits best for this situation. A general obligation bond, this is the one that's going to be backed by the city's ad valorem taxing power. And it is the one out of three here that you see that would require a vote of the citizens. Limited obligation bonds are also available, and for this one, it would be backed by some collateral such as the structure being built. And there's also special obligation bonds. This is what we use for the Rocky Mountain Med Center financing, and with the special obligation bond, those are backed by other general fund revenues, not by the taxation power, but other revenues that we could put as collateral. So those are the three types. I also wanted to show you on the next slide the statutory authority for bonds. North Carolina General Statute 159-48 gives the authority for a number of things for a city to borrow money and use bonds. I've highlighted in red the three here that we are talking about. B13 would be for parks and recreation. Down toward the bottom, you see D5, that's for streets and sidewalks, and D7 would be for the affordable housing project. And for these, I wanted to show you all of these. There's others in the group, but for any one of them, you could jump on just for the one thing, or you can actually group anything that you see here in categories B or D together into one bond order. It's also important to think about the timing for a bond. I'm going to walk through a sample timetable, but as I mentioned before, GO bonds or general obligation bonds are going to require the vote of the citizens. And what I'm showing you here is just voter turnout depending on when is the general election, which would have the highest turnout. It's at the bottom. The next general elections in 2024. Those have about 75% turnout. The midterm, which would be next year, 2022, has a 40% turnout. The others, which are just municipal elections, would be a 20% turnout. So it's just a factor to consider because you want people to get out and vote for your bond referendum, and this gives you an indication when most people show up for it. What's going to be important is public education, getting people to understand what the bond referendum is, so that we'll come out and vote. So I'm going to move now into just talking about the process for a bond. There's, of course, as you can imagine, lots of due diligence that we'll need to go through, and the process takes about 7 months. And in that 7 months, we're going to move through resolutions and notices and public hearings. The local government commission is involved in this. We will have meetings with staff at the local government commission. And if it passes through the staff, then we will have it go before the commission itself for their approval. All along, I know there's going to be lots of public information sessions as well. But getting the word out and talking with all the stakeholders is going to be important. So I'm going to start talking about what an example referendum calendar would look like. And I just want to say up front that this is just an example. There's currently not a bond referendum that's in process. It's just to give you an idea of the work involved from the time we decide to start until this becomes a vote for the citizens. So I'm going to start with month 1, and some of these are very similar to what we've been through with short-term financings, installment financings. It's a very similar process to what we did with our special obligation bonds when we financed the Rocky Mountain Convention Center. So in month 1, it's all about, it will start with the council adopting a resolution of their notice of intent to apply to the local government commission. And that resolution is going to authorize me as the finance director to apply with the local government commission and start those conversations with their staff. In that resolution will be some findings of fact that we make, and we do this with every financing that we do. And those findings of fact are really our justifications and reasons for doing the bond and acknowledging if there's going to be a tax increase that's planned. It's just several things that we will acknowledge in this resolution that will go to the local government commission. We'll also start out by publishing a notice of intent. We want people to know what we're doing, we want to be transparent about it. So we'll also start with that notice. On the next slide, again, this is an example, but in the second month, we'll file that application with the local government commission. It will include a sworn statement of debt, so we will tell them what our debt currently is. We will tell them that we are not in default on any of our debt, which we are not. We'll also, moving down to month 2, we'll start to introduce a bond order at a council meeting, and we'll adopt a resolution for a public hearing on that bond order, so the public has a chance to see the bond order and come and speak to it. In month 3, we're going to move toward letting the Joint Legislative Commission know about our intent to issue bonds. And these are our state legislators, to keep them informed as well. A sworn statement of debt will be filed with the city clerk and made public, and that statement will be our existing debt and also an acknowledgement that we're not in default on any of our debt. Continuing in that 3rd month, this is a really busy month, we'll publish the notice of a public hearing on the bond order. Possibly in that same month, after we hold that public hearing, council could adopt the bond order and pass a resolution stating the bond referendum. Again, this is sort of probably the fastest we could move through the process. It could certainly be slower as well. But once the resolution is adopted, then the city clerk is going to deliver a certified copy of that resolution, and we will provide that to Nash and Edgecombe County Board of Elections. They need to know that we're going to do a bond so they can do the work that's necessary to put this on the ballot. And Board of Elections ask that we have this to them by June 30th. I put 21 this year, but whatever year we want this bond on, this referendum on the ballot, we need it done by June 30th, or at least notify the Board of Elections by that time. Again, in month 3, we're gonna publish the bond order, totally transparent, so that, and we'll also have copies probably on our website as we've done in the past. And moving to the next slide, jumping to month 5 and 6, there will be 2 notices about our bond referendum. We'll probably do in month 5, that first notice. We want to, again, make people aware that there's going to be a bond referendum. It's got to be at least 14 days before the last day to register to vote. In month 6, we would typically publish the second notice. That one is required to be done at least 7 days before the last day to register to vote. And then in month 7, we arrive at voting day. So after the vote, on the next slide, we'll have the results of that. So post-election, we'll get a certified copy of the results. We're gonna also publish that in a local media so that everyone can see the results as well, again, transparent. And at this point, what's done is we've got a lot of due diligence that has been done, and we hopefully would have the approval of the citizens on the bond referendum. And if we've got that, then the next step is going to be getting the local government commission's approval so we can move forward with selling the bonds. And that starts the next process where we've got a team that's been in place during this whole typical 7 months, including our bond council. They're going to help draft the required actions in the bond order. We have financial advisors that we work with that you're familiar with. If you were with us when we did the event center, we ran through several scenarios, debt capacity, debt affordability. We'll continue to do this kind of analysis so we can see what it's going to look like. And once we've got a vote and are going to proceed, we're going to start fine tuning those numbers in preparation for further discussions with the local government commission, their staff, and also planning to go before the rating agencies. We're also this time going to need to work on our project plans because those plans need to be at least sufficient enough to validate the bond amount, that it is adequate for the project that's planned, but not excessive. So some better plans, better numbers for us to work with at this point. So once we have approval and bonds are issued, we've got 7 years after the bond order takes effect. Again, the team is going to continue to work. That's going to be a financial team, the city staff, bond council, underwriters, financial advisors. We'll have rating agency visits to rate our bonds. And also we'll have a team, that project team who's working on what we're going to do with those funds, if it's affordable housing, parks, or streets. So they'll be fine tuning those plans. So all of this is going to be going on simultaneously. So that was the last slide on the bond process. And again, I just want to emphasize that we're not working on a bond at this point. This is just to give you information what that process looks like. It is very involved, and we've been through it before with our special obligation bond, so quite familiar with it. But I thought it would be helpful for you to see what our existing debt looks like. And then I am going to move toward the end of this, just so you know, looking at some examples of what the financial impact would be for a bond issue. So right now, our existing debt in the general fund, we have on the right-hand side, you can see installment financing. This is short-term financing that we have on equipment and other improvements. That's the $9.8 million. We also have a HUD, a Section 108 loan through HUD of $1.4 million, and this is the financing, what's left of the financing for the historic Douglas block. We have some NCDOT, some road improvement agreements, 3 million, for those. And then the largest, of course, is the special obligation bond that I spoke about earlier. That's for the Rocky Mountain Event Center. And currently we owe $37.2 million. So all in, our debt is $51.4 million for the general fund. The graph you see on the left-hand side shows you over time going back to 2011, what our debt has looked like. It was just under 20 million at that time. And you can see in 2016, when we issued the special obligation bonds, it went up to just under $60 million with the issue of those bonds. And it has come down over time for each year that we have paid down on those bonds. The city's debt management policy looks at 3 main debt ratios. We do have a debt management policy. It's important for us to have that and to adhere to it. So looking over time as to what those ratios look like, I'll start with the one on the left-hand side, debt as a percent of expenditures. So what this is it measures the financial impact to the current year's budget of what the current year's debt payments would be. And there's a ceiling for that of 15%. So what that means is the debt payments, the annual debt payments, cannot be any more than 15% of that current year's budget. And you can see over time what that's looked like. So starting back in 2011, it was at 5.7% of the budget. Coming down to 2014, you see it went up a little bit to 8.4%. That was the refinancing of the Imperial Center. We did a financing on the Imperial Center that was historic tax credits and new markets, and that was the unwinding of that project, and we refinanced it. So you see that impact at that time. And if you'll come down, you start to see the impact of the special obligation bonds in 2017 and forward. But still, even as we said today, in 2021, the debt as a percent of expenditures is 8%, well under the 15%. The next column is debt as a percentage of valuation, and this is our tax value. The ceiling for that is 2.5%, and what that would mean is that annual debt payments should not equate to any more than 2.5% of that tax value. And you can see, again, starting in 2011, it was just under 0.42%. And coming down to 2017 is the fiscal year we issued the special obligation bond, so it went up to 1.43, and it's come down over time as we paid principal on those bonds. So we sit now in 2021 at 1.37%, well under the ceiling of 2.5%. The last column is 10-year payout. This is measuring the pace at which the debt is paid. It measures the structure of the debt. It's good to have a good blend of short-term and long-term financing, and it's good to have level principal as well. So you're paying the principal down evenly and not balloon payments at the end. If we did have that, it would show up in here. But again, back in 2011, we were well under above the floor of 50% at 91.3. So the higher is better in this case. And coming down to the current year, 2021, it's at 64.9%. So there's capacity in between the 50% and the almost 65%. And that capacity gets better each year as we pay principal down on our debt. I do want to mention that all our debt ratios are compliant with our debt management policy. This is another look at the existing debt. You'll see on the right-hand side about fiscal year exactly what our annual debt payments are in terms of dollars. So you can see it starts out at 3.3 million, and currently our annual payments are 5.6 million. Representing, if you go over to the next column, debt as a percentage of our expenditures of 8%, And what you see on the left-hand side is just a graphical example of what that looks like over time. So we don't have a whole lot of fluctuations, and the fluctuations that you see, again, on the annual debt payment, the top graph in 2014, excuse me, that was for the Imperial Center, then levels off, and then you see the impact of the special obligation bonds in 2010. So it brings us to what it might look like if we issue bonds. So what I'm going to show you here is just the impact, the financial impact of what that could look like. And in this case, if you look at the debt capacity, surplus or deficit, we have a surplus in every year. This just shows you where we are right now with having additional capacity to pay for debt without any additional revenue at all. No tax increase. So in 2021, that's $83,000. And it gets better over time. Now, I will say, if you look at 2027, it's 2.8, but some of that capacity would roll back into other short-term financing for our equipment, our rolling stock, and improvements that needs to be made. If we looked at a $25 million bond going to the next column, that would mean we need to generate somehow an additional $2 million for the payments. Now, we could generate that through a tax increase, we could generate that through reduction in expenditures, or other revenues that are increasing. So we would look at how we could do that. The total impact might not be $2 million if we could find other ways to supplement that. But if we don't, if $2 million is what we need to generate, that would be the equivalent of a tax rate equivalent of 5 cents. And that gets better as you come down, you see we have more capacity in those out years. And in 2024, that deficit's $470,000. That's the additional revenue that we need to generate to pay the bonds. And that's equivalent to 1 cent. And after that, there's no tax increase that's needed or no additional revenue that we need to generate. That's the $25 million example. I've also provided to you a $50 million bond example, and you can see what those numbers look like as well. In 2021, 4.1 million is what we're looking for, and that's the equivalent of 10.5 cents. I'm not telling you that's what we're recommending. I just want to give you some examples of what this could look like. And as we, if you agree to move further, we'll look at ways we can finance. We can look at other options for the bond as well. So that's just part of the financial due diligence we'll do once we've got just a little more information. Again, this is just an example. And I guess I'll open it up to questions at this point. If you've got any questions about the process itself or additional information that you would need.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. Always appreciate your thorough research and your homework, and thank you for the options that we see before us. Couple of questions. One, are there any limitations imposed upon us from the stimulus funds that are coming to the city of Rocky Mount? Are there any limitations on allocations or applications that we should consider? And then number two, in determining the valuation of a bond, what information do you need or does your team need in order to determine how much per category if we choose to do more than just housing? I mean, is that determined by project? Is it determined by numbers of units anticipated? Or is it just determined by the council's will on how much money we would like to encumber that our citizens, that we feel our citizens would be willing and able to accommodate in our current budget.
We'll start with the second question first, and to the amount, if I heard you correctly, I think what the project would look like and what that amount is would be determined by council. And this has happened with some of our other projects. We kind of start out with numbers and capacity for debt and what that might mean for a tax increase. You decide, what your appetite is for a tax increase, and then from there, we'll know how much we think we can afford. And from there, we can start to look at what projects we can do with that amount of money that we can afford, or that you're comfortable with. This is the approach that we took with the event center. I thought it worked well. But, we're also looking at how we can do more. We'll look at every option we can. Again, this is just one tool. The financing is only one tool. So there's other things that will couple with that. So we'll look at those as well. I think we just need to know what the plan is going to be. And then from there, we can figure out, okay, how much of this can we afford to do with bonds? What other pieces can we layer in to make it happen? So we just need some direction from council, and then we'll come back to you with what that's going to be and what we feel like we can do as far as that's concerned. I think your first question was about stimulus money and any restrictions on that. And that's something we're just now getting information on that as to what we can do with those funds. And we'll just have to get back with you on that to see if there's any opportunities for that. But what I will say with the stimulus money is it's gonna help in a lot of ways. And even if it's not eligible for this project, it supplements in other areas, which is helpful. It supplements in our operations and it helps our citizens, and that is value.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Knight? Councilman,
Yes, Amy, you mentioned about the bonds, if we decide to move forward with it and put it on the ballot, and you gave us 3 scenarios. One, if we put it on the local municipal election or midterm or general election, and we know that the largest turnout is in the general election, but that's several years from now. And so the question that was posed by one of our Academy members, what happens if the bond is not passed, is only passed only in one county? Could you talk about that?
That was really hard for me to hear. It was kind of garbled, but I think the question was what happens if the bonds don't pass?
Well, if it's passed, if it's
Okay.
if it's passed,
I don't
and
want to think about that. What we want to do is make sure that we educate people on the purpose and why the bonds are needed, the impact that it has. We really just want to focus on the educational and marketing piece of this. But if the bonds don't pass, then we can move forward to get the local government commission's approval.
other
And
part of that,
we would need a plan B for that.
other part of that question was if it only passed in one county and not the other county.
It would be a city, I think.
City,
It would be
okay.
a city, so
It's
it
a
would just be a
city,
simple majority, wouldn't it?
Right, that's
Of
right.
both.
It's not,
Okay.
it's not.
It's not a county. It's not
Okay.
a county.
Okay.
It sort of would be like the mayor's race, right? I mean, so whatever,
Yeah.
so one might win in Edgecombe, one might win in Nash, but it'd be the aggregate number, I think,
well, I guess the majority of both counties.
whatever the aggregate number.
Did that answer Councilman Knight?
It has to be a majority. in
Right.
both counties.
Thank you, Councilman Knight. Councilman Doddridge.
I don't know if this, Amy, if this is a question for you, but I'll start with you. The tax rate equivalent, you gave different figures for a 25 million and a 50 million and starting in 21 and going all the way out to 27. I wouldn't imagine if it was passed that we would start at a tax rate and then have a declining tax rate based off the amount of money needed, or I'm confused. I mean, is that what's being proposed? Is that what is demonstrated here? We start at 5 cents if we did the 25 million, and then it declines down back to the current tax rate, which is 0.685, or is?
Yeah, so let me help with that. On that slide where it shows the tax rate equivalent, it's not a combination of the 5 plus the 4 plus the 3. So what it would be, for example, in year 2022, it showed and under a $25 million bond that it was a 4 cent tax equivalent. We would only need 4 cents one time. Now, there are options, again, this would be in the due diligence, we looked at, if we want to stagger that. We did that with the Rocky Mountain Event Center. We did 2 cents, 2 cents, so we didn't do it all at one time, we did it over time. It can be done over time, we can look at what that would mean, or it can be done once. And really, we only need the tax increase at the point that the bonds are passed and we need to pay the debt. So early on, we would not pass it right up front. We would have to commit to the rating agencies and to the local government commission that we will raise taxes at the time that is needed to pay to service the debt.
So clarification, if we started in 22, it would be a 4 cent increase moving forward on the property tax rate, the rate that we have.
Yes, in that example, in 2022, it was 4 cents. So it would be a 4 cent increase to the existing tax.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
So maybe looking way too far ahead, what is our current standing with the LGC that would affect our ability to get this done?
I have continued to work with the staff at the local government commission, and we have a really good relationship. I mean, I talk with them often, and I've talked with them recently about some financings and proposed financings that we're looking at. And the relationship has always been very, very good with the staff. We have not gone before the commission for a vote. So that's a relationship. I mean, I couldn't answer that at this point, but we would certainly, I would recommend, we need to have frequent meetings with them, get them very comfortable with our project. They're also comfortable with the city, that, you know, our financial management, our policies, we would emphasize that to the staff and also provide the information to the commission.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Amy, so I understand the process going through and getting the bonds, the referendum, et cetera, and you're looking at this in a vacuum in the presentation. This is only as if we are raising bond money through referendum and then going through the LGC. But a number of the projects we looked at yesterday combined a lot of other resources that were both county, city, some were even private, and there were a different number of mechanisms. So I guess what I'm asking is, if you were to develop a project and you built a capital stack that included all these other partners in the process, and the referendum in and of itself was just a component of that, is that, you know, that may be the difference between go, no go on a particular project. What impact would that have? I mean, it seems like to me it would just be short of, in your example, of the $25 million that we've raised in a bond. But we could tighten up the project in that case if we had those other partners in play. Is that a reasonable statement? Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, so again, I don't know that we would do 25 million or even 50
Oh, I know.
million.
That was just an example. I know.
Combination.
Right. That's just an example. I understand that. But overall, you know, structurally, it could still work that way.
Yes.
Can I make a comment, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Just as I was just making a note to say that I'm reflecting as I listen to this conversation on the words from the mayor yesterday about Asheville starting their process with developing partnerships, collaborative partnerships, both internally, both internally and then externally. So as you were just speaking, sir, I was thinking about how important that action will continue to be. And also listening to the previous speaker, all the work is being done to attempt to develop those partnerships. But I think that would be important to think about for the council as you think about the financing. The building of trust and collaborations as another theme that should be pursued.
I had another thought as well. Just say, for instance, we float the bond and it didn't pass with the majority, then we could always work with the individual counties, such as Edgecombe County. I know not recently, but, a few years back, it was a bond that was passed, and that's how Edgecombe Community College built their biotech building. But that's another way, possibly. And then also, we have other organizations that could float a bond as well. Rocky Mount Housing Authority, the Redevelopment Commission. Could you go into some of the explanation with those two authorities having, those two organizations having authority to float a bond as well? That's an Amy question.
Is that a question for me?
Yes.
I'm really sorry, it's kind of hard to hear.
Andre, you might be able to put your mouth to the mic.
I don't know if I want to do that. What I was saying is that if we would float a bond and if it didn't pass the majority, both Edgecombe and that side of Rocky Mount, then we could work with either Nash and Edgecombe County to do a housing bond. The second thing I mentioned about two organizations, the Rocky Mount Housing Authority and the Redevelopment Commission has bond issuing authority. And I asked if you wanted to elaborate on those two entities that could possibly do the bond as well.
Yes, we could absolutely partner with either county to issue bonds. And again, there's other types of bonds. So there's the general obligation bonds that require money, but the limited obligation bonds and the special obligation bonds do not. Those are just backed by revenues. And so we will also look at those tools as being a good fit for this. The limited obligation bond again would require that we have some sort of asset to back as the collateral. The special obligation bond, we would need to demonstrate that we've got some excess capacity in revenues that might be growing, such as local options and gas tax. If that's growing, we might could demonstrate that could pay for the bonds as well. And not only us, but the counties could do that. So the counties could have those same tools that we have. And Dr. Val is right. It's just going to take some collaboration and partnerships to make this happen, not just all of the city, but all of us together.
Thank you.
I have another question, if I may ask. So what are the marketing requirements as it relates to selling this in the community? Is it correct or is it incorrect that the entity issuing the bond is not able to expend funds in marketing? Is that correct? Or do I have a wrong impression of that? Can the city finance a marketing campaign if we choose to move forward to get the citizens supportive or at least marketing to the community about why this is important? Or do we have to work through a third-party entity in order to do that?
You're correct. There are some restrictions around that, so we're going to have to take a deeper dive into what we can do there. We have looked at that in the past. It's been a while. But it may be that we need to get with a third party to help us with the marketing piece. But the public education piece is just as important. We've had a history here of having discussions to invite the public, putting information on our website. There are things that we can do to get public education out there.
And that's only if we opt to go the route of the general obligation bond, and that's what you're also stating.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Is there any amount that is a threshold or a table to state that it's best practice to do the GO bond as opposed to what we did with the event center where it was determined by a vote on the city council? Or is it completely up to the city council about which option we choose to take?
It's going to be up to the city council, but we'll provide information to you to help with making that decision and what are the parameters around each option, so we can explore what's the best fit. We'll make the recommendation to you, but it will be city council's decision.
Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, Val.
It's 12 o'clock. I'm impressed with you all. Great questions, your thoughtfulness, your attention is really admirable. And I think we're gonna give an hour for lunch, is that correct?
Yes.
Are we gonna do something more before lunch?
Now, we're going to move the city council and mayor discussion of the morning session. We'll move that to the first session coming back in,
Okay, all right.
if that's okay with the council.
Mr. Jordan, please repeat the statement.
Yes.
Communications.
Yes, we're going to move the mayor and council discussion to the first item when we come back from lunch. And we will break now for lunch.
So we would come back at 1:03.
Yes.
If you must be so precise.
All right. Have a good lunch, everyone.
And just a, I'll pause.
Yes, the manager.
Yeah. Will all of the delegates be returning after lunch? I think at 1:03, will everybody be coming back? You won't? Okay, because we wanted to give a little gift for them. Sorry, not. You want to do it now, real quick? Sure. Okay, so we'll do that really quick and recognize all of the delegates.
Okay.
And thank them certainly for their participation. Thank you, Frank.
Ruth, they leave tonight? The delegates leave tonight? Oh, no, what is Wednesday? They got one more.
Come up.
Today's third.
Yes, they want you to come up.
Today Thursday.
Council, invite. Yes.
Mark, may we get photos, please? Can you all go up to the podium that way they can hear you? Okay, gotcha.
John, you come back through.
This is really just to say thank you and to thank you for your personal time and expertise and input for being with us. And this is a gift from City Council and City Manager.
We gonna open all of them? Okay. Thank you. I just- Thank you. At this time, we will break for lunch.